You survived the blast. You stayed inside. You waited. Days passed, maybe more. You rationed water. You slept on the floor. You watched the clock like it was the only thing keeping you alive. And now, right now, you're standing at the door, hand on the handle, about to make the most dangerous decision you've made yet. Here's what no survival guide tells you. The blast didn't kill most people. The days after did, because stepping outside too early or doing it wrong can finish what the bomb started. In this video, we're going through exactly what happens after nuclear fallout settles, what the world looks like, what your body faces, and the specific mistakes that kill people even after radiation levels drop. Let's go. First, let's reset your understanding of what safe actually means out there. But here's the thing, staying inside was step one. What you do when you come out is an entirely different problem, because safer doesn't mean safe. Fallout radiation follows what's called the 7 to 10 rule, for every 7-fold increase in time after detonation. Radiation levels drop by a factor of 10. That sounds technical. Here's what it means in plain terms. In the first hour, radiation is at its peak. By 7 hours, it's dropped to 1/10 of that. By 48 hours, about 1%. By 2 weeks, roughly 0.1%. That's encouraging. But the environment is still contaminated, just unevenly, and the difference between a survivable zone and a lethal one can be a matter of feet. Most emergency protocols suggest sheltering for at least 24 hours, ideally 48 to 72. If you can hold out a full week, the numbers shift dramatically in your favor. After 7 days, residual radiation from most nuclear fallout can drop by approximately 90%. That's not a reason to relax, it's a reason to plan. What you're waiting for isn't the radiation to disappear. It's for it to reach a level where short, controlled exposure doesn't immediately compromise your body's ability to repair itself. The human body can handle low-level radiation. What it cannot handle is high-dose acute exposure, which is what the first hours and days deliver. So, the clock matters. But knowing when to go isn't just about time. It's about what you do when you get there. When you open that door for the first time after nuclear fallout, the world won't look the way you're imagining it. There's no fire, no mushroom cloud, no obvious signs that anything happened at all. What you'll get is silence. No cars, no voices, no hum of electricity. Just wind and a stillness that feels wrong in a way you can't quite name. And then you'll notice the dust, a fine, pale residue settled on every surface. Cars, sidewalks, leaves, rooftops. It looks like ash. It looks almost peaceful. That dust is fallout, and it is still dangerous. Before you step 1 foot outside, here is your minimum prep. Long sleeves and pants. Cover every inch of skin. Gloves, disposable if possible. Face covering N95 at minimum. Respirator if you have one. Goggles or glasses. Keep particles out of your eyes. A hard time limit? 15 to 30 minutes max on early trips. Because out there, exposure is cumulative. It adds up. Every minute counts toward a total your body is keeping track of, even when you aren't. Here's what most survival content gets completely wrong about this phase. People assume radiation is spread evenly, like a fog that just slowly clears over time. That's not how it works. Fallout creates what are called hotspots, areas where radioactive particles have physically concentrated, collected by wind, gravity, and surface texture. Where do hotspots form? Gutters and drains, fallout particles wash and collect there, low-lying ground and depressions, rooftops and ledges, especially flat ones, dense vegetation, leaves trap particles, and anywhere dust visibly collected. These areas can still be registering dangerous radiation levels long after the surrounding environment has dropped to manageable. And here is the terrifying part. You will not feel it. You won't smell it. You won't see it. Ionizing radiation, the kind that damages your cells, gives you no warning. No heat, no tingling, no immediate pain. You absorb a lethal dose and walk away feeling completely fine for a few hours. This is why a Geiger counter or radiation dosimeter isn't optional equipment. It's the difference between a calculated risk and a death sentence with a delay. If you don't have one, your only strategy is caution, distance, and time limits. Stay away from anything that collected debris. Move deliberately. Don't linger. Here's the part that most people, even people who know to shelter in place, completely miss. Going outside isn't what kills you. Bringing contamination back inside is. Every time you return from an outdoor trip, you need to follow this protocol. Every single time. No exceptions. Step 1. Strip outside. Before you cross the threshold back into your shelter, remove your outer clothing. All of it. Leave it outside or in a sealed entryway. That clothing has collected radioactive particles. Carrying it inside defeats everything you've worked for. Step 2. Bag and seal. Seal contaminated clothing in a plastic bag. Tie it. Leave it as far from your living area as possible. Don't shake it. Don't handle it more than necessary. Step 3. Shower immediately. Wash your entire body with soap and water. Pay attention to hair, ears, and nostrils, areas where particles can lodge. Now here is the detail that could save your life. Do not use conditioner. Conditioner is designed to bind to your hair shaft and smooth it. That same property causes it to trap and bind radioactive particles directly to your hair. You'll wash your body clean and walk away with contamination locked into your head. Done correctly, this decontamination process removes up to 90% of external radioactive contamination. Done wrong or skipped, you slowly poison your own safe space from the inside. Your shelter is your life. Treat every re-entry like an airlock. Acute radiation exposure is the obvious threat, but after fallout, your long-term risk shifts to something else entirely. Ingestion. Eating or drinking contaminated material introduces radioactive particles directly into your body where your immune system can't filter them, and your decontamination routine can't touch them. Internal contamination is significantly harder to treat than external exposure. Here's what you need to avoid. Open water, any standing water, streams, or rain collection exposed during fallout. Unprotected crops and garden produce if it was outside during fallout. Treat it as contaminated. Animals that were outdoors during the event, they may have ingested fallout through grass or water. Anything that wasn't sealed or stored before the event. Your safest resources are what you had in sealed containers beforehand. Commercially bottled water, canned goods, vacuum-sealed food, anything protected from outside contact. One more thing most people don't know. Boiling does not remove radioactive contamination from water. Filters help with some isotopes. Distillation helps more. But your best move is to stretch your pre-event supplies as long as possible. Because the first weeks are when contamination risk from consumption is highest. Here's something worth preparing yourself for before you open that door. The world outside isn't going to look catastrophic, not the way movies show it. There are no burning buildings, no panicked crowds, no obvious signs of chaos. It's going to look abandoned. Think of the footage from Pripyat, the city evacuated after Chernobyl, cars parked mid-journey, storefronts intact, buildings standing, nature already beginning to reclaim the edges. Normal, except empty. That contrast, the world looking fine while being quietly dangerous, is one of the most psychologically disorienting things survivors describe. Your brain wants to believe what your eyes are showing you, that it's okay, that you can relax. That instinct is the enemy. You may encounter downed power lines, damaged structures that look stable but aren't, abandoned vehicles blocking roads, no emergency services, no communication infrastructure. The physical danger is real, but so is the mental weight of navigating a familiar world that no longer operates by familiar rules. At this point, you've survived the blast, you've survived the fallout period, you've made your first careful steps back outside. Now what? You build a routine. Because survival in this phase isn't a single heroic decision, it's 100 small, disciplined ones. Short, controlled trips only, never push time limits in the early days. Keep a radiation log if you have a dosimeter, track cumulative exposure. Plan every trip with a purpose. Conserve energy, limit exposure. Maintain strict decon on every return. Protect your shelter's integrity. It's the only truly safe space you have. Look for others. Community dramatically increases survival odds. You're not waiting for rescue anymore. You're rebuilding operational capacity in a changed environment. The mindset shift from surviving an event to surviving in a new reality is what separates people who make it long-term from people who don't. The biggest mistake people will make in this scenario, thinking the danger is over. It's not. Surviving nuclear fallout is never one decision. It's not, I got to shelter in time. It's not, I waited the right number of days. It's a continuous series of decisions, each one building on the last. The blast was step 1. Sheltering was step 2. Surviving the fallout period was step 3. What you do when you step back out, that determines everything. Thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe and check out this next video.